Earlier this week, I released episode 44 of my podcast, A Simpler Time True Crime. I cover older unsolved cases and challenge the idea that a simpler time means a safer time. Now, most of the time, I try to cover underreported on cases whenever possible, and some of them gain a little more traction than others, and this one really seemed to strike a nerve, so I'm going to share it with you. I've had locals in my inbox saying, I have lived in Elizabethtown, or E-Town as the locals call it, for years, and I had never even heard of this case. Even my own podcasting friend, her name is Lauren, and she has True Crime BFF podcast. She is a Kentucky native from the area. She said she had not heard of it either. So to me, I felt like I had to get this story out there, and you should share her case as well. In January of 1992, Elena Sanchez Hawkins was home with her two sons. She was helping her older son get onto the school bus and off to school, and then caring for her 3-year-old. At a little after 7 a.m., her older son did get on the bus, and then she was there to just care for the 3-year-old. She lived on Route 62, which goes through this part of Kentucky. It goes up through the town of Boston, out of Elizabethtown, and even up into Bardstown, which you might be familiar with, especially if you listen to true crime podcasts. Shortly after her older son got on the bus, her husband, who was at work at the time, Michael, he called to check and make sure the morning just went smoothly, but no one answered the phone. He thought that was a little odd, but he waited a while and then he called back. When he called back, that's when he knew there was a problem because the person who answered the phone was his 3-year-old, and all he could say was, "Mommy's bleeding." Michael rushed home and ended up calling police right away because what he found was out of a horror movie. It was his wife laying in a pool of blood on their living room floor. Elena had been sexually assaulted. She had her hands bound behind her back, and she had had several stab wounds as well as her throat slit. Elena kind of kept to herself. They could not think of who would want to do this to her, and her husband was quickly ruled out. They canvassed the neighborhood, which there was houses. It's definitely not populated like a subdivision full of houses. It's definitely a more rural stretch of area. And they talked to some neighbors as well as collected evidence from the scene. They went through her garbage can, tried to find out anything that they could, maybe something that the killer discarded, and they were kind of left there. They were able to find out a couple of things in their early investigation. One, they were able to rule out Michael. Two, a neighbor had reported seeing a black Datsun truck in the driveway that morning around the time of Elena's murder. And then the third was that she worked at a local convenience store slash gas station, and that she apparently had a customer who used to kind of give her the creeps that would come in. The truck sighting didn't lead anywhere. They couldn't find anybody who drove that truck or piece that together. Nor did they get any farther with the weird customer who creeped her out. Her 3-year-old son couldn't remember much, but to me that's important because he also didn't point out anybody that he knew who did it. Now, investigators tend to think that the person who did this was someone known to her only because there was no sign of forced entry and no sign of struggle at the house. I tend to have a little issue with that. I think in this part of Kentucky, it would not have been that strange for her to have her door unlocked. I also think it would have been really easy for someone to show up to the front door, have a ruse of some sort, like I'm a utility worker, I'm this, just get her to crack her door even a little bit, force his way in, and then she's going to do anything to protect her young child. So if it's don't fight me, she's not going to fight because she's going to do what a mother does and protect her child. So with all that being said, her case went cold for years and years, and it wasn't until 2008 when there was a similar crime that police started to piece something possible together. So in 2008, there was a woman in neighboring Breckinridge County who a man gained entry to her home. She had her small infant grandchild home with her at the time, and this man attacked her. He sexually assaulted her violently, stabbed her, slit her throat, and left her for dead. And he actually thought he killed her, but she had played dead. So she waited until he left and somehow found the strength to crawl through the house and get help. And she ended up surviving and naming her neighbor, a 59-year-old man named Ernest Pine, as her attacker. Police began to discuss the connection of Ernest Pine to this case because both crime scenes had some similarities. In both instances, the victim had been sexually assaulted, there had been a small child present, there had been stab wounds, and there had been a slit throat. Listen, I am all about innocent until proven guilty. I am not alleging anything, just simply pointing you to where the direction has gone over the years because it's been a fairly quiet case. Some people believe that her case is connected to all of this misfortune in Bardstown that people talk about. That's a possibility. Some locals have suspected that maybe her case is connected to another unsolved murder in the Bardstown area from years prior to all those other ones. This is the 1990 murder of Lucinda Strange, and she was murdered on the side of the road on the street where she lived in this rural part of Kentucky, and her killer's never been found either. She was stabbed dozens of times, and it was horrific. But a lot of people keep coming back to the similarities in the crime Ernest Pine went to jail for and Elena's case. Now, if I am someone who is connected to Ernest Pine in any way, or I am Ernest Pine and I am innocent, I would cheer on this DNA testing because if he's innocent, listen, my personal opinion is he didn't serve enough time in jail or have enough of a sentence for what he was charged with. But at the same time, he shouldn't be connected to Elena's case if he didn't do it. So clear his name. I would be in favor of it. And if he's not, then let's table that and focus on who actually did it. But if the evidence points back in his direction after there's testing, then he shouldn't be out of prison. That would mean that the state of Kentucky is not safe while he is free. Make no mistake that my only reason for covering this case is to help keep Elena's name out there, to help keep her case out there, and to get answers for her surviving family. Her husband died just 12 years later in his early 40s and left their children without parents at such a young age. They've missed out on absolutely everything and were robbed of that. And the least they are owed is answers and closure in what happened to their mother. Elena had a promising future ahead of her, and she deserved better than her ending, and she has deserved better than the attention she has gotten since her death. This needs to not just be swept under the rug. Elena's case needs to be solved, and it can be solved. As of the last reporting on this case, there was a small amount of DNA left over to test. Police were hesitant to do so at the time. They had used up a lot of the DNA sample early on when you used to have to use more, and they were worried about using this last sample up unless they had a slam dunk. So here's where you come in. If you are someone who lived in Elizabethtown at the time and you know anything, even something that seems irrelevant, police may need corroborating statements to go along with the DNA to get this case across the finish line. So Kentucky State Police need your help. If you are someone who lived in the area and maybe you were a neighbor and you knew more at the time than you really could say, if you worked with her at the gas station and you know who that guy is who was giving her the creeps, that could be important. Maybe you know someone else who drove a similar truck. Maybe it wasn't a Datsun. Maybe it was a similar small pickup truck, but that's important information to have. Maybe someone confided something in you, or maybe it's something as simple as you worked with this person, or worked with someone, or knew someone, or was friends with someone, or someone in your family acted really odd in the days after Elena's murder. If you are that person with information, you owe it to Elena and her family.